Good morning, students, staff, and members of the community.
We are so excited for you to be here with us celebrating 100 years of women's suffrage on this beautiful e-learning day. I'm Colby Flade.
And I'm Katia Torres.
We are both seniors at Round Lake High School, and we are honored to be here hosting this event with you.
We would like to take a moment to welcome esteemed board members, Round Lake administrators, fifth graders from local elementary schools, NEA representatives all the way from Washington, D.C., and all 2,000 Round Lake students for joining us today.
Before we get started, let us take a moment, please, to introduce these three accomplished and inspiring women in our government. Please give a warm round of applause to Melinda Bush, our Illinois State Senator. Mary Ross Cunningham, Vice Chair of the Lake County Board. And Joyce Mason, our Illinois State Representative. Good morning, ladies. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Each politician will have 3 minutes to answer each of the following 2 questions that have been asked by members of the community. Let's get started.
All righty, question number 1. Ladies, what challenges did you face?
1965. So I was a veteran nurse at the VA hospital. I was a union steward. I was a tenant president organization. I was always in the community doing something. And our first, women's couldn't vote to 1965 when the voter right came. And now women's can do a lot. I came on the county board in 2002. I first ran. It was a new district that was cut. And I ran, and I won by 100% of the vote. Women's rights, years back in the 20s and the 30s, women's was housewives and homemakers. They didn't have that right. But now I'm very proud to know that women's can not be an equal to a man, but women's can do just as much. I became a widow in 1968. That's when I joined the King March in Alabama, where I'm from. And I had to step up to the plate and rear my children, 4 children. One of my sons is a mayor of Waukee now. I taught him political. So it's always good that women have this right to do this, that to step up and help the men's. I say help the men's out. That's what we do. And I'm happy to be on the county board to help set the policy and make changes and oversee the agency, because our county is a large county and it's growing for all different entities. So that's what I did. I'm happy that this job, when you become a senator, state rep, county, whatever, you have to have guts, feelings to do this, because you got to be ready for anything that throw after you. You have to be ready for it. So I'm happy to be where I'm at today.
Thank you. All right, Representative Mason.
Thank you. Well, I'm kind of the newbie at the table here. I was just elected. Actually, a year ago today, Facebook tells me, was election day. So it's pretty exciting to look back and look at the pictures and the videos and the incredible journey that I've been on since then. And you know, I will say, being as part of this women's wave you might have heard about, one thing that really helped was having amazing trailblazers like these 2 fabulous women that I am so incredibly honored to be sitting with here today. Both Melinda and Mary have lifted me up through my journey, have shared advice, have given me shoulders to cry on, and toughened me up when I needed it. And I think that that is really, really helpful as we go. You know, another thing that I was very fortunate to have is because this was kind of the year of the women, suddenly there were all of these trainings available. Women run for office, it's free, come on, you know, all sorts of organizations were doing that. And I went to one and there was a panel of elected officials, and there were 3 men and 3 women. And the question was posed to them, what were you afraid of when you decided to run for office? And the women, you know, went and they said, well, gosh, I was afraid for my children and what that would be like. And I was afraid about, you know, being able to have enough money. And I was afraid that people would be mean to me. And I was afraid that I wasn't smart enough. And I was afraid that I didn't have a political science major. And they went down the row and, you know, talked about all of the things that they thought about and going to that decision and making that decision. And I kid you not, every single man went, no fear. What do you mean? I just woke up and decided to run. Oh, yeah, I just decided I wanted to be in politics. And I think that mindset, you know, women, those traditional roles are still there. You know, we're all mothers and caregivers, and, you know, there's a societal expectation that that is first and foremost, right? So there's not only the demands of running for office, but then there's the thought like, oh my gosh, I have to spend 5 months in Springfield now. How am I going to care for my family? What am I going to do? So number one, statistics show that women have to be asked multiple times in order to run for office. And thank you, Senator Bush. Thank you. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't without her. And two, you know, women do go through all of this thought process about being good enough. And I think that's something we have to overcome. We're good enough, we're smart enough, we have a ton to contribute, and 51% of our elected officials should be women.
Thank you.
Our second and final question for our panel is going to be, what challenges do women in politics and working women in the United States still face today? We'll start with you, Senator Bush, again.
So you want to know what challenges we still face today, now that we're there? The challenges are still there. They're very real. As I listen to Representative Mason talk about questioning whether you should be there, whether you're good enough, smart enough, equal to those around you, that happens to me regularly still. This is my 8th year in the Illinois State Senate, and I'm a pretty respected member at this point. And most days I remember that. And then other days, the Latino population, Latinas and the black population, we're about 23%. You know, the white population, they're at about maybe 5 to 6%. It's wrong. Our representation should look like this. That's your challenge. That's what you should be thinking about.
Yeah, thank you. Going on with Vice Chair Cunningham.
Thank you. The National Organization for Women's Now, the challenge that we have today, the struggle is still there. You're in this, but it's still there. When you're running, it's still there. And you look at some things that you know when you're there, you only want to vote, but you had to caucus to get when you want something passed. And when you don't get it passed, you can't get intimidated and upset about that you didn't get it. Because in this position that we are in here, Springfield, federal levels, county level, city level, when you're in this position, it always gonna be you haven't done enough. You haven't done enough. But you have to do what you have to do, as long as you got contact with your constituents. And it's just a struggle. I think politics gonna always be a struggle. It'll never not be in a struggle. But all the young people that's sitting out here today, you are a future leader. You are a future leader. You have to know now, when you get in the 7th grade, I would say, some kids in the 5th grade, they know what they want to be when they grow up. So you have to think positive. You have to think that, hey, I want to be a science. I want to be the president. We never had a woman president. We was that close, but we didn't get it. So we had to move on. That's what gets you to make you be like, I'm not going to do it. Don't never give up. And whatever you do, when you turn 18, register. Get yourself registered. Register on your own. You can register your own self when you're 18. Parents don't have to register you. So you can get ready, because we're not going to be here always. We're going to be gone, and who's going to take our spot? Someone have to step in, and it has to be somebody like you. Make up your mind what you want to do, how you going to do it, because this is not an easy task. This is very hard. You got to take all the bad talk, all the good talk, but you got to, the good have to overweight the bad. So just sometimes I go home and lay down at night and I wonder, what did I do wrong? Did I satisfy someone? You don't know what you're gonna, what is what, because you don't know how other people think of you in politics when it comes to politics. Some politics, you know, we look back at years how politics was corrupted, but that don't mean we are. We don't have to be corrupted because we go back at I watch a lot of the old tapes from back Hitler's. He was rough, it was bad, but we in office to take care of our peoples that come out, citizens that vote for us. So they have to have some kind of, they have to have, you know that we is there for them. We have to be there for them, myself, because it's rough. It ain't nothing nice. I'm not trying to discourage you, but we need you guys to grow up and say, hey, I'm going to run for school board. Education is important. I come out of an education family. Education are very important. That's the first thing you want to do. Thank you. Stop.
Thank you. Wow. And Representative Mason.
Thank you. So, considering some of the barriers that still exist, I do believe it's getting easier because the more women that enter the legislature, the county board, the easier it is for young people like yourselves to look and say, hey, that person looks like me, so that's a possibility for me. And that was not the case before. So that's a plus. But, there are still those logistical roadblocks, women, again, being the caregivers, expecting to hold most of the burden of families. And then there are things like significant travel, schedules that change on a dime. My schedule is always changing and evolving, and there are last minute things, and that's not conducive to the person that's supposed to be in charge of that stable home situation and be there for the kids. And then there are the stereotypes, like you see someone,
All right, so now we're gonna shift our attention to Ghostlight Readers Theater as they perform their piece, A Lot to Say, composed of short stories told by women in history and in the world today who have been impacted by women's rights and discrimination. Let us welcome Marcos Cadena, Selena Heinlein, Ariana Hirtzer, Ava Klein, and Katia Torres to the stage as they perform this piece.
The state of the world today demands that women become less modest and dream, plan, act, risk on a larger scale. Women have a lot to say about how to advance women's rights, and governments need to learn from that, listen to the movement, and respond.
Les mères, les filles, les soeurs, Representantes de la
mothers,
nation,
daughters,
demandent
sisters,
être constitué
representatives of
en
the
Assemblée
nation,
nationale,
all demand to be
considérant qu'elle est
consulted
ignorante
into
la
a national
des droits de
assembly.
la femme.
Given that
Cette nation
ignorance,
cause de
disregard,
marqueur
or the
public à la
disdain of the rights
corruption
of
des
women are
conformances.
the only
Avec
causes
cette
of public
disposition
misfortune
dans une déclaration
and the
seulement,
corruption of
à droite
governments,
nationale
have
élève
decided
à
to
de
make
la femme.
known in a
Elle fait
solemn
que cette
declaration the natural,
déclaration
inalienable, and
présente
sacred
à
rights
tous
of
les
women.
membres des corps
This
sociaux.
declaration,
J'appelle
constantly in the
sans
thoughts of
les
all
droits
members
et
of
les devoirs
society,
afin
will
que les
ceaselessly
actes et
remind
devoirs
them
des
of their
femmes
rights and
et ses devoirs
responsibilities,
des hommes
allowing the
avant un
political
acte
acts of
chose.
women
Elle se
and those
compare
of men
avec la
to be
loi
compared in
instituée
all
politique
respects to the
en
aims
son
of
plus
political
respectée.
institutions,
En font
which
que
will
la
become increasingly
recommandation des
respected,
citoyennes
so that the
font
demands
des
of female
documents de
citizens
principe
henceforth,
accessibles,
based on simple
tournant
and
toujours en
incontestable
maintenant de la
principles,
Constitution,
will always
des
seek to
bons
maintain the
mots, avoir de
Constitution,
droits.
good
En
morals,
conséquence,
and the
les
happiness
sexes
of all.
supérieurs.
As a
En
result,
beauté comme
the
en
sex that is
droite,
superior
dans
in
la
beauty,
souffrance
as it is
personnelle,
encouraged during the
le
pains of
décret
childbirth,
imposant
recognizes
la
and
hospice,
declares,
elle
in the
achète
presence
cette
and
peine.
under
Le
the
droit
auspices
sauveur
of
à
the
la femme,
Supreme
à la
Being, the
citoyenne.
following rights of women and the female citizen.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal.
Here, in this very first paragraph of the Declaration, it is the assertion of the natural right of all to the ballot. For how can the consent of the governed be given if the right to vote be denied?
The world has never yet seen a truly great and virtuous nation because in the degradation of woman, the very fountains of life are poisoned at their source. The laws given on Mount Sinai for the government of man and women were equal. The precepts of Jesus make no distinction. It's not Christianity, but priestcraft that has subjected women as we find her.
To have drunkards, idiots, horse racing, rum-selling rowdies, ignorant foreigners, and silly boys fully recognized, while we ourselves are thrust out from all the rights that belong to citizens. It is too grossly insulting to be longer quietly submitted to. The right is ours. Have it we must, use it we will.
Learning while at school that the charge for the education of girls was the same as that for boys, and that when they became teachers, women received only half as much as men for their services, the injustice of this distinction was so apparent.
I thought that the chief thing to be done in order to equal boys was to be learned and courageous. So I decided to study Greek and learn to manage a horse.
There will never be complete equality until women themselves help to make laws and elect lawmakers.
The more I think on the present condition of woman, the more I am oppressed with the reality of their degradation. The prolonged slavery of woman is the darkest page in human history.
Trust me that as I ignore all law to help the slave, so will I ignore it all to protect an enslaved woman. Oh, if I could but live another century and see the fruition of all the work for women. There is so much yet to be done.
The individual woman is required 1,000 times a day to choose either to accept her appointed role and thereby rescue her good disposition out of the wreckage of her self-respect, or else follow an independent line of behavior and rescue her self-respect out of the wreckage of her good disposition. If I had my life to live over, I would do it all again. But this time, I'd be nastier. We're half the people. We should be half the Congress. Men and women are like right and left hands. It doesn't make sense not to use both.
Ha llegado la hora de la mujer que
The
comparte
time
una
has
causa
come for women who
pública
share in a
y ha
public
muerto
cause,
la
and
hora
her
de la
time as a
mujer como
forceless
valor
and
inerte y
numerical
numérico
statistic
dentro
in
de la
society is
sociedad.
dead. The time
Ha
has
llegado
come
la
for
hora
women
de
to
la mujer
think,
que piensa,
judge,
juzga,
reject, or
rechaza
accept,
o
and her time to
acepta,
witness,
y ha muerto
bound
la
and
hora de la
perilous,
mujer
the
que
volatile
existe,
political creation
atada y
of the future of a
impotente a la
country is dead.
caprichosa elaboración
I demanded
política
more
de los
rights for
destinos
women
de
because
sus
I know
hijos.
what women had to
Exigí más
endure.
derechos para
I
las
will
mujeres,
return
porque
and
si
I
otras
will be
mujeres tuvieron
millions.
que aguantar, volveré y seré millones.
I will always work for human rights for all people. I would like to be known as a person who is concerned about freedom and equality and justice and prosperity for all people. Memories of our lives, of our works, and our deeds will continue in others. There is no future without education. I see the energy of young people as a real force for positive change. One person can change the world.
Economic equity is an enormous empowerment of women. Having jobs that provide income means that women can be a more effective force, a more equal force in the political process. Women with income take themselves more seriously, and they are taken more seriously. Who knows what women can be when they are finally free to become themselves?
Women of
We want people to spread the word, to call on the federal government to act, and to send a strong message to all states that we need laws and policies in place that protect against forced and child marriage.
My father did not like us going to school. He told us that girls growing up not being married is a problem in our society. Because of his beliefs, the girls in our family only go to the end of primary school. My father also believes that if girls don't get married young, they won't have children because they will be too old. My father also wanted us to get married so he could get a bride price and receive a lot of cows. I was 13 years old when my father arranged my marriage. The man who was supposed to marry me came with his family to discuss the date of our marriage. He was 29. I wanted to go to secondary school like my brothers so that one day I can help the Maasai. I want them to know the importance of sending their girls to school. The Maasai need to learn about the importance of education. All boys and girls should have the same right to be educated.
I spoke out publicly on behalf of girls and our right to learn, and this made me a target. On my way home from school, a masked gunman boarded my school bus and asked, "Who is Malala?" He shot me on the left side of my head, and I woke up 10 days later in a hospital in Birmingham, England. The doctors and nurses told me about the attack and that people around the world were praying for my recovery. I spoke out publicly on behalf of girls and our right to learn, and this made me a target. After months of surgeries and rehabilitation, I knew I had a choice. I could live a quiet life, or I could make the most of this new life I had been given. I was determined to continue my fight until every girl could go to school.
I was placed into government care just before my 13th birthday, and I, like so many other kids in government care, fell prey to the predators that hover around group homes, foster homes, and anywhere vulnerable kids congregate. It's hard to describe the exploitation. It was just everywhere. It was just a part of life. Girls would come to the corner I was working, beat up or looking downcast because they had been emotionally abused. There was this one girl who tried working my corner. We got into a huge fight, and then I realized how young she was. I tried to protect her. She was supposed to be in a foster home. Then one day, she just disappeared. I saw her pimp a few weeks later and asked him where she was. He just laughed and said, "She's gone. I sold her at a truck stop."
We are asking people to understand that slavery still exists today. In fact, according to a recent New York Times article, if you count the number of women and children in bonded labor, domestic slavery, or sexual slavery today, there are more slaves in the world than at any other time in history. We have to start looking at the world through women's eyes. How are women's rights, peace, and development defined from the perspective of the lives of women? It's also important to look at the world from the perspective of the lives of diverse women, because there is not a single woman's view anymore. There is a single men's view.